So the trick for painting bouquets like this is to sort of paint them backwards. And in this video, I'll show you how it's done and we can paint this anemone flower bouquet together. As usual, you can find a list of the brushes I'm using here in the description. I'm going to start by painting the flowers first. So for that, I'm going to use the abstract round brush and a very light kind of bluish gray color. And I'm just going to paint a silhouette for each anemone flower. And I'm not super worried about the arrangement here because we can move these around later on. Next, I want to define the kind of shading for each flower petal. So for that, I'm going to make a little sketch first. So I'll make a blank layer above our flowers. And I'm going to change to the pencil brush. And I'm just going to sketch out a center for each flower. And then for these flowers that are facing us, I'm going to draw 3 petals just like this onto each one. Now for the angled flowers, I'm just going to do 1 petal like this. And for the shadows, I'm going to make another blank layer. I'll choose a slightly darker version of our flower color. And I'm going to use a pretty smooth brush. I'll use the hard edge round. And these petals here are the ones that are facing us. And I want them to be casting a shadow onto the petals behind. So I'm just going to kind of rough out a line here on the outside edge of each petal. There we go. Now for these kind of sideways flowers, it's a little bit easier. I'm just going to do a shadow along the top. Now for the sketch here, I'll get rid of it. I'm going to set our shadow lines to multiply. Then I'm going to grab the water blender brush. And for example, remember these are the petals that are facing us. I'm just going to blur the side here of the shadow that's being cast onto the petals that are behind. And for these angled flowers, I'm just going to blend the top edge of the shadow. Now I did these shadows on their own layer, and that's because I want to kind of control the transparency of that. So I'm just going to set it so they're just barely visible. There we go. And I'm going to make another blank layer, also set to multiply. And this is where I'm going to draw some kind of line details. So I'm going to change my brush to the fine liner pen. I'll keep using the same kind of dark flower color. And as an example here, I'm going to draw some lines on this petal. And I'll set the opacity again so those lines are just barely visible. There we go. And I'll continue on this same layer, just drawing lines on all the petals. And once those lines are done, I'll make another new blank layer. And I'm going to choose a sort of bright, kind of violet color like that. I'll switch back to the abstract round. And I'm just going to do a light circle just on the center of each one. And this can be pretty rough. And I did this on its own layer because I want to apply a Gaussian blur and just soften it up. I just want to create a sort of colorful transition at the center of each flower. And then to finish these up, I'm going to choose a very dark, kind of bluish color like that. I'll continue with the abstract round. And I'll do a kind of center shape like this. And for these sideways flowers, I'll do a slightly tapered one. Then I'll shrink my brush size a little bit and do a kind of series of dots just along the outside of it. And once these anemone flowers are finished, you can open the layers panel here and see that we did those in 4 layers. I'm going to pinch them together and merge them onto one. And this is what I was talking about earlier. You don't have to worry about the arrangement until this point, because now that the flowers are complete, you can use the freehand selection tool to kind of position and arrange the flowers just however you want. And once the flowers are finished and you're happy with the arrangement, you can make a layer that's actually above the flowers, and this is where we're going to paint the leaves. So I'm going to change my brush to the sharp round brush. I really like this one for doing leaves. And I'll use this kind of shade of green just as an example. And what I'm going to do is do stroke-based leaves, where I press lightly and harder and kind of go on top of the flower. Then I'm going to grab the eraser brush, which is set to the fine liner pen. And I'm going to erase it so it looks like those two leaves are going behind the flower. And I'm going to go through and paint a bunch of leaves, making sure they're kind of terminating behind the flower. And I also think it's really important that you change the shade of green often so that not all the leaves end up looking the same. And this looks pretty good. I could definitely fit a few more leaves in there, but I don't want to make it too crowded. Now it's optional, but you can add some details to the leaves too. So for that, I'll make a layer above the leaves. I'll choose any kind of medium green tone. I'll use the fine liner pen. And I'm just going to draw some lines kind of down the center of just a handful of leaves. Now I'll change the transparency mode to multiply. Kind of lower it to 0, and once again, kind of adjust this until those are just barely visible. There we go. And once I'm happy with those details, I'll just pinch and merge them together so all the leaf stuff is on the leaf layer. And moving on to the stems, I'll make another new layer that's above everything. And even though the stems are in the back of the bouquet, they're going to be the top layer. I think I'll use some pretty dark bluish green colors for these stems. For the brush, I want to use a very kind of firm and steady brush, so I think I'll use the hard edge round again. You can see it has a very kind of consistent width to it. I think that makes it good for stems. And I'll do each stem one at a time. So I'll start from this flower, and I'll draw the stem going down like that. Then I'll change my stem color a little bit, just so they're not all the same, and I'll do another flower. And I'll go through and do all my stems like this, making sure they kind of line up nicely at the bottom. And just like I did with the leaves, I'm going to use the eraser brush and just erase all the parts of the stems that shouldn't be visible. And you can definitely be kind of creative with this and show the stems going kind of in front of some leaves and behind others. Now, once the stems are finished, you might notice that your bouquet is a little bit out of balance. So that's easy to fix. So just select all the layers for the bouquet at the same time. Then you can use the arrow tool set to warp. And you can kind of bend it and skew it a little bit to find a better balance point. There we go. And to finish this bouquet up, all I need to do is add some shading. So that's pretty easy. I'll make another blank layer above everything. I'm going to choose a kind of medium gray tone like that. I want to make sure the layer that we're working on is set to color burn. And I want to use a smooth brush again. I think I'll continue with the hard edge round. And because this layer is set to color burn, wherever I paint this, it's going to get a little bit darker. And if I happen to go off in the white area, it doesn't show up because color burn doesn't have an effect on white. So I'm going to go through this illustration and just add some shading wherever I think it needs it. And I think this shading looks pretty good. Maybe it's a little bit too dark though. So I can control that by messing with the opacity of the layer there. And just like that, our bouquet is all done. If you think I've earned it, I'd truly appreciate it if you can give this video a like. And if you want to paint more flowers, I've got a lot of tutorials that cover that, and I think you might like to watch these two next.